Welcome back, everybody, to Lunch Orders. If you haven't already caught up on episode 1, then go back and watch it. We'll still be here. My name is Beck Kavanagh and I'm the host of Lunch Orders. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. For Ashley and myself, that's the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And take a moment to acknowledge and pay your own respects to the traditional owners of the lands that you're joining us from. I am thrilled today to be, we've looked at the ethics of AI and we've started to look at the ethics of AI. We've looked at some of the fundamental frameworks of AI, and today we're looking at AI and art. And we're doing that with Ashley Ronning, who is a NAM Melbourne-based illustrator, artist and risograph printer. She makes art about technology, music, mental health, magic, space exploration and nature. She can usually be found in her studio drawing, printing or working on a book about space. When her pens are down, she's playing pinball, going to gigs or having a tinny in the sunshine. Some of her clients include Familiar Faces, Who Gives a Crap, Frankie Magazine, 5 Senses Coffee, ABC, Milk Records, Archie Rose Distilling Company, Meanjin, Suntory, PBS, Poison City Records, and She Shreds Magazine. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I'm going to hand over to Ashley in just a minute for her soapbox, and then we'll kick off with the rest of our conversation. Before we do so, I would also, as always, like to thank our education partner, VATE, the Victorian Association of the Teaching of English, for their excellent and thorough teaching materials that they've been madly creating for series 1 and 2. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. All right, I'm going to hand over to you, and then when you've finished your soapbox, we'll chat.
Great. So my name's Ashley. I'm here today to talk to you about artistic intelligence, AI art, some of the ways you can use these tools in your artistic practice, as well as some ways they've been used unethically and how to spot this kind of work. So I've been a huge sci-fi fan forever, and so when these tools came out, I was really excited to have a go at using them in my practice. AI systems such as ChatGPT, Gemini, DALL-E and Midjourney have allowed anyone with a computer to be able to interact with AI. However, I found that these tech companies behind these AI systems are stealing from artists like me. This technology is moving fast, without time for rules or regulations to catch up. This leaves many facets of the creative industries open for exploitation. Artists, writers, musicians and actors, and more, are having their creative work stolen and used to train AI that may someday replace their jobs. I'll be taking you through some examples of what I believe to be interesting uses, as well as ways it has been used by businesses in place of hiring real artists. So how can generative AI be used in the artistic process? Upon the release of Midjourney, I was keen to experiment while exploring themes of artificial intelligence and privacy. These tools work by, it kind of looks like a chat box, and you enter a prompt like, there's a dog sitting on some grass and he's got brown and white spots, and these generative text to image AI tools will spit out a picture of a dog on some grass. I used these to work on my zine, Computer is Your Friend, that I released in 2023. It's about an AI assistant that convinces you to let it take over more and more of your life until you're completely under its control. I wrote, illustrated and risograph printed this zine, but I also played around with Midjourney and ChatGPT to inform the voice of the evil AI. Here are some examples of the way I used ChatGPT. I had some conversations with ChatGPT to kind of tease out some sinister sounding lines that I could work into the writing of my zine. But after a little while of chatting with ChatGPT, I got a warning for violating their content policy. I don't know what it is exactly that tipped them off, but I found that bit pretty amusing. There's also things that I got out of ChatGPT that I decided not to use, like some pretty interesting zine titles. I also used Midjourney to inform what the evil AI, what kind of art it would make. I put in a few things like computer and human that are best friends, friendly computer, and I used some of those prompts to draw my own versions of what this evil AI wants to show the human to convince it. Another way that I've seen other people use AI in their practice is posting their AI experiments on Instagram like a mood board. These creators are using their incredible experience and knowledge to create their own mood boards which inspire their own art and are like a visual diary of reference images. And I've got here an example by Georgia Perry. She's got her own Instagram for her own original artwork, she's an incredible illustrator that uses really bright, vivid, juicy colours, and she's very inspired by like vintage visuals. And then on the right, it's her mood board account, which is a whole separate account. It's called Superhuman Sketchbook, and she shares with us her kind of like her own experiments in working with Midjourney and churning out stuff that informs her art. And you can see, like, over her vast experience, I think she's been working for over 15 years, it informs what she puts into Midjourney, and that informs some of her newer work. I've also got an example by Tim Malloy, who's based in Bundaberg in Queensland. His original artwork is sci-fi, comic amazingness. There's like wastelands and experiments and aliens and all kinds of stuff. And in his AI-generated images, he shows us some stills from some fictional movies that are about, a mysterious sci-fi wasteland with this beautiful filter over it. And he also, even though they're on the same Instagram page, he makes a very distinct, he distinctly labels that these are AI-generated works. This kind of use of AI by artists has been criticised by people who believe any use of these systems is unethical. That's because the data sets of these tools are made up of writing and images that are taken from artists without their consent. There are businesses of all sizes taking advantage of this opportunity to make content on the cheap rather than paying artists for their work. I've got an example here of an Australian publication that has used an AI image rather than paying an artist such as myself. And they've not credited it either. They've not made it clear that it's an AI image. And I can see from like the kind of, there's a few blurry bits and a bit of garbled text on this robot that it's an AI image. And another example here is by Candlelight Concerts that have completely ripped off the style of artist Jamie Hewlett. This concert is classical covers of gorilla songs, and Jamie Hewlett is the artist that has brought to life the visuals of the band Gorillaz. You can see his original artwork on the left and the ripped off version on the right. It's pretty close to his style, and it's using similar colours and such, but there's a few differences, like it's not quite right. There's different amounts of fingers on each hand. The strings on the violin, there's only 3 strings, and the bow's upside down. Candlelight Concerts has also not acknowledged that this image was made with AI. I'm starting to call out images like this in a project that I'm calling Keep It Real. I want to teach people about how to spot these images and to hold companies to account and to demand that they pay real artists for their work. Some signs that I want to tell you about to look out for include odd shapes, garbled text, body horror, and insider info. So here's a great example you might have heard about. In Glasgow, there was an event called Willie's Chocolate Experience. They promoted the event using images created with AI, and as you can see, their attention to detail wasn't very good. In this image, there's a candy wonderland, but it's also surrounded by text that says things like entuning entertainment, catagating live performances, cartoon tunes, exacerbate lollipops, and a paradise of sweet teats. If you haven't looked up this event, you should. The event that eventually happened was a complete disaster, and it was very hilarious for all of us watching on. I've got another example here. This is the insider info and body horror section. What I mean by body horror is that a classic one is extra fingers or missing fingers. Sometimes there's extra teeth. In this case, there's like a big block foot on a person. He's got like his shoes are different sizes. At the back, the drum kit looks all good, but the drummer's missing some arms. Also, the insider info is things like perhaps you've got a particular interest in a subject. Like I'm a musician and I go to a lot of gigs, so I can spot a few inconsistencies there from that knowledge. So the bass guitar in the middle there has 5 pegs, which isn't unheard of, but it's a rare thing to happen. There's also another bass guitar in the back, which is a bit unusual. On the left-hand side, there's a guitar with 2 guitar necks, and there's some leads on the ground that kind of go nowhere. And it's a weird one because at a glance it looks like a striking image, but if you look closely, you'll see some odd details there. And I've got another one here. It's for a gig in Brisbane, and this one uses an AI image that at first it looks like a pretty good illustration and a well-designed poster, but if you look at the clown's hands, they look terrifying. There's like 10 fingers on one of the hands, and I can see that, a designer has taken elements of an AI image and has put them together into a poster, but there's still some pretty scary looking stuff there. But unfortunately, these AI systems are improving very quickly, and these things will become harder and harder to spot as the technology improves. Also, please don't call someone out on using AI unless you're really, really sure, because if that happened to me, I think I'd be pretty upset. In my perfect AI utopia, AI-generated works would be identified as AI, and artists would be able to give consent and receive compensation and credit when their work is used in training data. We need strong regulation to ensure AI is used ethically and responsibly by tech companies and consumers. I love the act of making art. I love getting right into a drawing and spending hours and hours on the little details. I love sitting down and drawing with my friends. I also love going to exhibitions and seeing art and experiencing all kinds of art in all different ways. And with all this going on, I worry that people will turn away from making art because they can see these jobs being taken away. Art doesn't need artificial intelligence to live, but if you do use AI in your work, make the final outcome your own. Art connects humans, and maintaining this connection is more important than ever.
Thank you. Gosh, a lot to think about, and I'm trying to kind of untangle out my own thoughts as you're talking. I'll start with hopefully a slightly easier question. What is it, what draws you to art? Like, what is it that you love about that process of making art?
What draws me to art is, I think I like being able to just, anything I imagine in my head, I can just, draw out on a page, and I love being able to make my friends laugh or make really thoughtful work that captures someone's imagination or feelings. And I also love experiencing that in other people's art.
I feel like there's this kind of nugget that I'm grappling with in response to your soapbox, just around the relationship between art and money and AI. Because it seems to me like one of the great fears and, genuine justified fears of artists when it comes to the use of AI is the fact that their livelihoods are being taken away, and also their intellectual property in some cases. But I guess if we think to the future of AI where, let's assume an ethical solution to the use of artist work to train AI, it seems like the ongoing issue then will be people like these companies using AI to do work that otherwise they could have paid an artist to do. At what point did you start seeing art as a job, and how has that kind of financial incentive changed your own relationship with it?
I think as a teenager, I thought the only way into an art career was studying graphic design. And then once I was there, I actually discovered VoiceWorks, and then that helped me make the link between, I can illustrate for VoiceWorks and illustration's a job, and I can use commercial illustration to make some money and also make work to exhibit that isn't as lucrative for money, and I can make those things work together and make that a job. And I'm so happy that I'm able to make that a part of my career.
Yeah. We had our first guest for this series was Dr. Matt Agnew, and he was talking about his hope for the future of AI and how it would potentially buy us more time to do the things that we love. And I suppose there's, a version of this where we could say if AI did all the posters, then we could do all of the cool experimental stuff. But of course, we also have to find money to live in this increasingly costly world. But also, I'm sure you've seen that meme about how we'd hoped that AI would give us more time to create and it would do like the laundry and the dishes, but instead we're doing more of the productivity work and it's stealing our creations and our ideas. Where do you feel hopeful in terms of AI? Like, where is your kind of optimistic perspective on AI and art?
It's a tricky one because I've been trying to think about what a best case scenario looks like, and I'm totally not against AI because it can do so much for fields like medical research, and it's just and accessibility. It could be such a great accessibility tool. But with art, I think sometimes even as working as an illustrator, sometimes it's hard to get people to value the skill I've got. Like, someone will maybe upset about a fee that I've told them about, and I think it's about them not realizing how much time it takes and not realizing the value of that work. So yeah, I think until people value artists more, I think it's going to be a struggle with AI and art going forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's like people are so fundamental to the creation of art and yet so undervalued in its process. In terms of AI as a tool to create art, how is it similar or different to the other tools in your arsenal? Like, how is your relationship to it similar or different to those tools?
There's a few tools in Photoshop that are like making things a bit easier, like content-aware fill, like being able to fill in, like extend a background that I've already worked on, and it will use the information in my image to extend that background. But also Adobe is asking its users as of this year to hand over all the rights to their work to use in their own data set for AI.
Crazy.
So it's hard, even where there are little glimmers of like, this could help my process, there's always like a bad side too. I think I'd like to automate more of the crappy admin stuff that I do.
The sending the invoices, responding to the emails. Yep.
Sometimes I tell people I don't feel like an artist, I feel like a professional emailer. I want an AI emailer.
I would love an AI emailer as well.
Yeah.
But then it's almost like, you know, there are some cool ways to experiment with AI as well. And I know a lot of writers who have, you know, written stories with AI, or this zine's a good example of that. So I think there are ways for us as artists to have a relationship with AI. What are some of them? I'm just thinking about what an ethical response or an ethical relationship with AI looks like for creators, but also for people engaging those creators. What kind of responses have you had to calling people out for use of AI?
I guess some people commissioning the work didn't realise that the person they've commissioned were using AI.
Mm-hmm.
For the bigger companies, like, there's just no response.
Yeah.
They don't care, or it's better for them to not engage.
Yeah.
And then there's like, I haven't run into this myself, but there's a group of people who are saying that these kind of tools democratize art.
Mm.
Like, we've been stealing away this work because we have these skills, but now they're able to also take part in this field because they've got access to something like Midjourney, and they can just write a prompt and get some art back instead of spending the time to learn the skills to make that art.
That feels like a really complicated argument. What's your response to those people?
I think they should have a nice, like, draw with their friends. There's so much joy in creating, and I think that if they haven't experienced that, then that's sad, and I hope they find a medium that they love that they can get into.
I wonder if those people think that, like, Google Doctor democratizes healthcare. You know, that feels like a runaway thought.
Yeah.
That we'll just leave there. Have you had anybody deny it? Because as you were saying, you know, you'd want to be really certain before you called somebody out. I have definitely seen examples of all of the little, like, red flags that you've pointed out, and yet I don't know that I would ever feel certain enough to actively say to somebody, you're using AI, how dare you? So what makes you so certain, or is it just your experience?
I haven't called out too many people. I deploy that very carefully if I do call out someone, but I wouldn't just look at one piece of art. I would look at see if there's a pattern there, like see if this company or this artist has other work that kind of also is ticking some of those red flag boxes. And a good way to check in would be to ask them, how did you make this artwork? Or to say, what artist made this piece? And see if they've got a response. Like maybe you'd ask and they'll straight up tell you that it's made with AI, and then you can have a discussion about it.
Yeah. Yeah, curiosity is always a good way forward. Yeah. In terms of generative AI, it seems a bit like we're in a catch-22. Like, there are obviously huge ethical implications with companies, particularly companies that have limited or very few artists engaged. Companies using the work of artists to feed and train their AI. And yet, by feeding and training the AI, it can then potentially be a more functional tool for artists. Is there, like, a role in these tech companies for artists, do you think? And what might that look like? Like, if a tech company reached out to you and said, hey, we're really cognizant of your concerns about AI and we would love to bring you in as an artist to help us with this process, what do you think that kind of role might look like?
I'd love that. That would be cool. I think it would be talking about consent and intellectual property and copyright, and maybe there's a way they can, like, get artists to consent to having their work in this data set, and, you know, maybe like royalties with music, maybe get a couple bucks every now and then from having their art as a part of this. But yeah, as long as they have data sets that have work that isn't consented to, it just feels so wrong. Like I made this last year and I've learnt this zine I've made last year and I've learnt so much about AI since then, and now I feel a bit like I wonder if I would have made it in the same way now. Even though I was being really clear that I was using it, but now I'm like, it's these data sets are so, they just make me feel icky.
Yeah. So what's the solution to that, do you think? Is it to stay away from AI altogether, or like what is our responsibility as artists in terms of how we engage with AI in our practice and not just in our professional lives?
I think being really clear when you use it and how you've used it in your process is a great thing to do, and that it's, if you want to have a play around with it, especially to understand it more, then I think that's a great thing too. It's great to experiment in there. But yeah, just make sure that the final outcome of what you've made is yours and isn't just straight off mid-journey, like you've plucked what you've made off mid-journey and then put that out into the world.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about where those parameters of the creative process end and begin in you versus outside of you with tools or ideas or inspirations. I'm also really fascinated, though, about the relationship between AI and art and truth, because, I mean, art and truth has always had a pretty complicated relationship. And I look at artists like, there was the example of that photographer who submitted an AI photograph to, I forget the name, but a global photography competition.
Maybe like a Sony photography competition? Yeah, I heard that one.
And won, and then kind of was caught up in this controversy when he admitted that the work was AI. And yet I think artists often caught that kind of controversy of deliberately misleading or misrepresenting the truth in order to, you know, make people question their own relationship with art and with artistic practices. So I wonder where those uses of AI as a manipulation fit in with this kind of ethical responsibility to share or reveal when it's been used.
Yeah, like there's, now that you mention photography, it's like when the camera first came out, people were furious and had similar discussions about this tool won't make real art because it's not from your hand, and I really value photography as a beautiful art form, and I think people have come around to it since then. And there's other art forms like collage that have had a bit of discussion about like appropriation of work. But yeah, as long as you're really clear about what you're doing and just showing the truth in your art, and maybe showing a process as well. Like there might be a point where we have to show more sketches and behind the scenes work to show that a piece of art is really ours, or at what point we did use an AI tool.
Do you think that potentially requires artists to defend too much of their process? Or defend or reveal too much of their process?
Yeah, we've already got so much work to do.
Yeah, that's right. I just think, imagine having to keep track of and kind of account for all of those steps. Do you think there will be a future in which AI is, you know, we're as nonchalant about its use in art as we are about photography?
I mean, it'll be great to see a version of that happening. Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell,
yeah. Well, we have unfortunately hit time, but you have a question to leave our audience on?
Yes. I'd like to ask you, what part of the creative process would you never want to change?
Something to think about. I wonder. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Ashley, for coming along and sharing your work and your ideas.
Thanks for having me.